Okay, everyone. Now, people wouldn't think the WTO, the World Trade Organization, is that important for sovereignty compliance, right? Should states surrender to a certain degree? When I say surrender, I don't mean like completely, but only in part their sovereignty to listen to the WTO. That was created in 1995, obviously after the end of the Cold War, to kind of create more trade. So it's a trade dispute organizations, and members, which is interesting, can vote anonymously. So on the condition of anonymity. So basically, it's pretty interesting because you're going to read a couple cases, right? Before we get into international law, this is part of organizations in law. So one, which is more topical, is interesting, where Slovakia, now I've never been to Slovakia, so I'm in a Soviet tank in Colombia. It's a bar, actually. So Slovakia is refusing grain imports and other imports from the Ukraine. So this is Slovakia, independent country that broke from the Czechoslovakia, independent country, wants to help the Ukraine, but sorry, we love our wheat. Same with Poland, right? So the Ukraine is using the WTO in order for them, Slovakia, to comply. This is a very interesting debate, because should states help other states, even in times of need, like the Ukraine, or does it want to protect its own production? This is huge, bigger than people think. Because, if you look at the WTO, you start seeing like the India and other countries against the United States for putting barriers against their turtles and their shrimp, saying, no, this is under the Endangered Species Act. Our bigger states, the European Union as a whole, has been taken to court by African nations. Mercosur, that's the Southern Cone, has taken both the United States and the European Union as a whole to the WTO in these court cases, because they're saying you're not following the rules that you actually created. I find this somewhat fascinating, because people don't really think of trade as being, that, huge, but it is. And you see it. Slovakia and Poland are both saying we're not going to take more Ukrainian grain and other products because we have to protect our own producers. But at the same time, the Ukraine then submits a complaint to the WTO. Should Slovakia, it's specifically Slovakia in the little case that you can read, say, okay, we have to follow the WTO rules? Or do states have the sovereignty to protect its own production? Frederick List and others, Alexander Hamilton, believed in the infant industry argument that if your industry and other production was being hurt by foreign competition, you do have the right to tariffs, particularly if they're new. That was the United States Civil War, when the tariffs of abomination, where the United States, particularly where I'm from, Massachusetts, Lowell was the first factory, we started putting up tariffs against Great Britain. They called them the tariffs of abomination, the South, because then Britain would retaliate, right? If you put tariffs on us, we put tariffs on you. Does this create a trade war? And the tariffs didn't go against the northern part of the United States, but the South, the cotton, the tobacco, and other stuff that the South was exporting to Great Britain. Great Britain started putting tariffs and quotas. Tariffs are monetary punishments, and quotas are, a certain number, like we can only take in so many bushels of cotton to feed its industry. So, that helped spur the Civil War. Trade is a very, very big issue in the world. Should other countries attributable to Russia's use of force put on sanctions on Russia? And a lot of countries aren't. Africa, Saudi Arabia, China, etc. It's only really the European Union and the United States, Canada, etc. But a lot aren't. So when you start looking at the WTO, the World Trade Organization, you start looking at not only the self-interest involved in trade, then you have to start looking at the moral implications, right? So should Slovakia open up, not only because of the WTO laws, but also because it has a moral obligation to help the Ukraine? So this is something we're going to wrestle with, and this is one of the tensions of organizations. And the WTO, the World Trade Organization, created in 1995 to facilitate international trade abroad, so countries couldn't, go into tariffs and quotas and just cut off their borders to trade. And we see the problems with the supply chain, right? After during the COVID and even after. So trade is very, very important for people's livelihoods. But at the same time, do states, this is the tension here, have the right to protect their own industry like Slovakia, like the United States shrimp and turtle? Or are they creating things, like you'll see if you do scroll around in the WTO, there's some pretty interesting EU and US wording in order to keep other products out to protect our own. And on top of that, we do subsidies. As you know, the United States and the European Union have huge farm subsidies, and a lot of Latin American and African countries have taken both the United States and the European Union to court over these farm subsidies. That is, we fund farmers huge amounts of money, and we actually pay them not to export on the market because then the price goes down. It's called the miserizing growth because, the products of agriculture, if you dump a bunch of carrots on the market, what happens to the carrots? The prices go down so much, farmers get poor. That's a paradox. The more you have a harvest, the poorer you get. That's what happened with coffee. Once all these countries opened up after 1990, right? The fall of the Cold War, Vietnam, who we never thought would be supporting coffee, all these countries started inundating the world with coffee. That's why you have fair coffee prices in order to keep the coffee kind of afloat, or, peasants and other people would be devastated by the coffee decrease. I remember when I lived in Nicaragua, I know I say that ad nauseum, but they came in from the countryside when the coffee market just crashed. It was very, very sad. And then you get up huge in these developing countries, in particular, the rural folks that go into the urban areas, creating more favelas, poverty, et cetera, because there are not as many jobs as they would like. So this trade has a lot in the organizations, and I want you to really think about this tension. Should Slovakia open up its market to help the Ukraine, or do states have the intrinsic sovereignty to say, look, no, we're going to protect our own products? Thanks a lot, everyone, for coming out. I really appreciate you listening to my lectures. If you have any questions, please leave them in the community forum.